I threw away his last letter that morning. I watched the envelope fall into the trash, but I could still hear his words in my head. It had been 9 months since Liam left, and I was tired of pretending I was fine. The letter had arrived a week late, like always, and like always, it said nothing real, only words that felt soft and empty, like smoke disappearing in the cold. I told myself it was time to stop waiting. But as I walked past the old cafe near the train station, the place we used to meet every Thursday, I still slowed down. The bench was empty. The lights were off. Yet somehow, the memory of him filled the street like perfume that refused to fade. People say first love is sweet, but mine was like winter, beautiful, silent, and cold. I had fallen hard without knowing how deep the fall would be, and now I was left with the sound of a train that never stopped, and a boy who had promised everything but chose something else. It had started 1 year ago. I had just moved schools. Everything felt unfamiliar. New walls, new voices, new rules. I was the outsider. I sat at the back of every classroom, trying to be invisible. I did not speak unless someone spoke to me. I ate lunch alone. I wrote poems in a notebook I never showed anyone. And then Liam walked into my life like sunlight through dirty glass. He was not loud or popular, but he moved with quiet confidence. He noticed things others missed. I remember the way he sat, calm, focused, always sketching something in his notebook during breaks. I remember thinking he belonged to a different world, and somehow he invited me into it. I do not know when I started to care. Maybe it was the first time he helped me carry my books when they fell in the hallway. Or maybe it was when I found a small drawing of a tree slipped into my locker. No name, no message, only art. Weeks later, I saw him sketching that same tree in the park. That was the moment I knew. I was falling in love with someone who didn't even know my name. But he did learn it. Slowly we began to speak. Not much at first. Small conversations about schoolwork, about music. His voice was always calm, but something inside it made me want to listen. He had a way of making the world feel smaller, simpler, and soon he became the first person I looked for every morning. Liam brought peace into my life. Not excitement, not adventure, just peace. And for someone like me, that was enough. We started meeting after school. We walked to the park when the weather was warm. He sketched. I wrote. We did not need to say much. Our silences felt safe. But there was always a clock ticking. He was in his final year. I knew he would leave soon. We never talked about the future. That was our mistake, because one day, without warning, the future arrived. He told me he had been accepted into a university abroad. He said he was leaving in 2 months. I remember that moment with painful clarity. We were sitting on our bench under the tree. I was talking about my latest poem. He was quiet, too quiet, and then he said it, in a soft voice, as if he hoped I would not hear it. I smiled and said I was happy for him, but inside, something cracked. Just before we continue, I'd love if you could subscribe. It helps me share more stories like this. He promised we would stay in touch. He said he would write every week, and for a while he did. The letters came regularly. He told me about his classes, the new city, the people. He asked about home, about school, but slowly his words changed. They became shorter, colder, like someone writing out of duty, not love. And then they stopped. Now, months later, I stood in the street holding the scarf he once gave me. The air was sharp, and I could still smell his cologne on the fabric. I pressed it against my face, hoping it would make the ache go away. But the truth was, he had left, and I was the one still standing in the past, hoping the sound of his voice would return. I did not go home right away. I walked to the river instead. It was quiet there, and the sky was turning pale as the sun faded. I watched the water move slowly, and I remembered how Liam once said he liked rivers more than oceans. "Oceans are too loud," he told me once. "Rivers are steady. They keep going, no matter what." But now he had gone, and I was still here, trying to remember how to keep going. I thought I had prepared myself for this. From the beginning, I knew it could not last. He had dreams bigger than our small town. He talked about art schools and foreign cities, about walking through museums and sketching strangers on the train. I loved those dreams. I loved him for having them, but I also feared them, because none of them included me. Still, I never told him that. I never told him that when he talked about leaving, I wanted to ask him to stay. I never told him that I had started to imagine a future where we stayed in this town a little longer, where we took long walks in the cold, where we had quiet dinners and fell asleep next to each other after reading. I never told him I loved him. Not once. Maybe that was my mistake. When he left, I tried to be strong. I smiled. I told him I would wait. But deep down, I knew the truth. People do not stay. They move forward. They change. They forget. And I, as always, was the one left behind. At school, everyone had moved on. No one talked about Liam anymore. New students came. Teachers changed. The world kept spinning. But for me, time had stopped. Sometimes I looked through our old messages. I tried to read between the lines to find some hidden meaning, a word, a sentence, something to explain why he had stopped writing. I blamed the distance. I blamed the time zones. I told myself he was busy, tired, overwhelmed. But late at night, when I lay in bed, I stopped lying to myself. He had fallen out of love. Maybe he found someone else. Maybe he realized that what we had was just a quiet comfort, a passing chapter in his story. Maybe I was never meant to be part of his real life, only the soft beginning. I remember one afternoon in early spring, weeks before he left. We had skipped our last class and gone to the lake. The sky was heavy with gray clouds, and there was a kind of sadness in the air. He stood by the edge of the water, skipping stones. I watched him, memorizing his profile, The way his shoulders moved, the way he tilted his head when he was thinking. "You're quiet today," I had said. "So are you," he replied without turning. Then he looked at me and said something I would never forget. "Do you think we'll still talk this time next year?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him we would never stop. But I knew his question came from fear and also from honesty. "Maybe," I had said, "if we try." That was the last real conversation we had before he left. And even then, we both knew the answer. No one tries forever. Back at home that night, I opened my window and let the cold air in. I liked the way it cleared my thoughts, even though it made my hands freeze. I took the small book of sketches he had given me and turned its pages slowly. He had drawn everything we loved: the park, the cafe, the tree by the river, my hands holding a pencil, my face when I was writing. I stopped at the last page. It was blank. He had said he would finish it once he came back, but now it was just another promise left behind. I closed the book and placed it under my bed. Then I sat at my desk and opened a new notebook. I had not written anything real in months, but the words came easily now. I wrote about a girl who loved quietly, a boy who left too soon, a story that never finished. I wrote for hours until my hand ached and my eyes burned, and when I stopped, I felt lighter, not healed, not better, but clearer. The next morning, I got up early and took a walk before school. The streets were still empty. I passed the bakery where we once shared a chocolate croissant. I passed the bridge where he kissed my cheek for the first time. I passed the bookstore where he bought me a poetry collection, saying, "This one reminds me of you." At the corner of the street, I paused. It was the first time I walked all those places without waiting for him to appear. Maybe that was what healing looked like. Not forgetting, just walking the same path alone, without breaking apart. By the end of the week, I stopped checking the mailbox. I no longer expected his letters. I no longer dreamed of his return. I still missed him, in small moments, in strange ways. But I stopped hoping he would come back. I knew now that he wouldn't. Liam had been my first love. He came into my life like quiet rain on dry earth. He made me feel seen, important, real. He gave me joy and pain in equal measure. And then he left. But I survived. And that, perhaps, was the most important part of all. Spring turned into summer. The light stayed longer each evening, but the days still felt empty. Even when I smiled at my classmates or replied to teachers, it felt like I was moving through fog. Something inside me had gone quiet. I spent more time alone. I read books. I walked by the river. I wrote pages and pages in my notebook, not for school, but for myself. Stories, thoughts, letters I never sent. Some were to Liam. Some were to the version of myself that had believed in him too much. People around me started to forget our story, but I couldn't. I often thought about the version of Liam that had made me feel loved. Was that version real? Or was I the only one who saw him that way? It's strange how memories become both softer and sharper with time. I couldn't remember the sound of his voice anymore, but I remembered exactly how my heart felt when he looked at me. One weekend, I decided to visit the old cafe by the station, alone. I had not been there since he left. As I pushed the door open, the bell above it rang the same way it used to. The place looked the same, but smaller. I sat at our old table near the window, the same seat, the same chipped mug for hot chocolate. But everything was different. I stayed there for nearly an hour, watching strangers come and go. No one noticed me, and somehow that made me feel free. When the waitress brought the bill, she looked at me and smiled. "First time here?" she asked. I almost laughed. "No, I used to come here with someone." "Nice place for memories," she said. "Or letting them go." I nodded. And maybe, in a quiet way, I did begin to let go that day. Weeks passed, and then months. My final exams came. I focused on my studies. I reminded myself that I still had a future, with or without him. One evening, I came home and found a package on the front steps. There was no name, no return address. Inside was the book of sketches, the same one he had given me, the one I thought I had lost. I turned the pages quickly. All the old drawings were there, our park bench, the tree, my hands, and at the end, where the last page had once been blank, there was something new. A sketch of a woman standing alone by the river, holding a notebook. Her face was turned away, but I knew it was me. Below it, he had written one sentence. "I hope you're still writing." I sat on my bed, holding the book, my fingers shaking. He had found a way to reach me, after all this time. But I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I closed the book and placed it gently on the shelf. Because I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't the one waiting by the window, hoping for love to return. Something had changed in me. Slowly, without noise, I had started to rebuild. I joined a local writing group. I met people who talked about books and language the way I did. One woman, Sarah, became a close friend. She was older, kind, and full of quiet wisdom. She read my stories and said, "You write like someone who's lived through something. Don't hide that." Her words stayed with me. One night, I shared a personal story at the group. Not everything, not Liam's name or all the details, but I told them about the feeling of being left, about learning to stand on your own. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then someone clapped, then another, and another. That moment changed something in me. I realized I didn't have to carry this story alone anymore. I could use it, not to hold on, but to move forward. By the end of summer, I had applied for a writing program in the city. It was small but selective. I didn't expect to get in, but I did. When the acceptance letter came, I sat on my bed and read it twice. Then I looked at the sketchbook again. This time I smiled. I was still writing. Moving to the city was hard. I missed my mother, my quiet room, the sound of the river. But the city had its own rhythm, faster, louder, fuller, and I was ready for it. Classes were challenging. My professors asked difficult questions. I had to explain my choices, my words, my reasons. I struggled at first, but then I began to find my voice. One evening, after class, I walked past an art gallery. The window displayed a collection of soft pencil sketches, mostly landscapes and street scenes, but one image made me stop. It was a bench under a tree, almost identical to the one Liam used to draw. I walked in slowly. The gallery was small and warm. A young man stood near the back, arranging frames. "Is this your work?" I asked. He turned. It wasn't Liam, but his face reminded me of someone. "No," he said, "but the artist will be here tomorrow. Do you want to leave a note?" I shook my head. "No, that's okay. Thank you." As I stepped outside, the wind felt sharp on my face, and for a second I imagined seeing Liam walk past on the street, holding his old sketchbook, unaware I was even there. But the street was empty, and I kept walking, because I knew something now. First love can shape you. It can hurt, teach, and leave you with questions that have no answers. But it doesn't have to define your life. It's not the final chapter. It's only the first one. I stayed in the city and built a life around simple things. A cup of tea in the morning, a quiet seat on the bus, my notebooks, my routines. I was no longer trying to forget Liam. I had stopped trying to hold on to him too. He was just a part of my story now, not the whole book. I spent more time writing. My words felt stronger, my characters braver. Maybe it was because I had changed too. I stopped checking old messages. I stopped thinking about the what-ifs. I still walked past the places we used to go, but now I walked without slowing down. One Saturday afternoon, I was sitting in a small bookstore, reading near the window. The rain tapped gently on the glass. A woman next to me sneezed, and I handed her a tissue from my bag. She thanked me and smiled. "You look like someone who reads a lot," she said. "I write," I replied, before I even thought about it. Her eyes lit up. "That's even better." We talked for a few minutes. She introduced herself as Sarah. She was in her 40s, with calm eyes and a soft voice. She invited me to join her writing group. "It's small, friendly, nothing serious," she said. "But it helps." I went the next week. I was nervous, but everyone was kind. I read a short piece about someone finding peace after loss. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then someone said, "That felt real." I smiled. It was real. Writing became more than a habit. It became how I understood myself. I didn't write about Liam directly, but parts of him lived in the details. The quiet boy, the empty bench, the goodbye that never came. I didn't need to name him. I only needed to tell the truth of how it felt. Then one evening, months later, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Emma." His voice had changed. It was deeper now, slower. But it was still Liam. I didn't speak for a second. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I felt calm. "Yes," I said. "I hope this isn't a bad time." "It's okay," I replied. He told me he had seen one of my stories online. A friend had shared it. "The one by the river," he said. I read it. I think it's about us." "It's about me," I said gently. He was quiet. "I guess I deserved that." "You didn't call to talk about stories," I said. "No," he admitted. "I called because I needed to say I'm sorry for leaving the way I did, for not being honest, for not saying goodbye properly." I looked at the window. Outside, the city lights flickered in the distance. "I waited," I told him, "for a long time." "I know," he said. "And I was a coward." I didn't argue. I didn't comfort him either. I had nothing left to prove. "You seemed strong in your story," he said. "Are you really okay now?" "Yes," I said. "I am." We talked a little longer. He told me he was teaching part-time, living in a small town, still drawing. He didn't say if he was happy. He didn't ask if I missed him. Before we ended the call, he asked, "Do you think we were real?" "We were," I said. "But not everything real is meant to last." When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't feel empty. I just felt done. The next morning, I wrote about a phone call from the past. It wasn't a sad story. It was about a girl choosing her own path after hearing the voice of someone who once defined her world. A few weeks later, I got an email from a small publisher. They had seen my blog and wanted to include my work in a short story collection. I was surprised, then thrilled. I said yes. That winter, my name was printed in a real book. I held it in my hands and felt a deep kind of joy. The quiet kind that comes after you've fought through something and come out whole. When I went home to visit my mother for the holidays, I brought the book with me. She placed it on the table and looked at me. "You've changed," she said. "I've grown," I replied. She didn't ask about Liam. I think she knew better than to bring up old names. On New Year's Eve, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, watching fireworks in the distance. I thought about everything that had happened, the school year when I met him, the letters, the silence, the slow healing. It all felt like another life now. And maybe that was the gift of first love. Not that it lasted, but that it changed me. It showed me the kind of love I deserved, and the kind I needed to give myself. I still walked by the river sometimes. The bench was still there. The tree had lost most of its leaves, but it stood strong. I sat there one last time before the new year began. I opened my notebook and wrote, "You were my first love, but not my last, and not my forever."